Now let's look at two final scenarios, and these are much simpler scenarios that are a bit quicker to demonstrate. The first is a sudden or unexpected shutdown of the server, for example, power failure. So remember that at any given time there are things that have happened on the server that are stored in memory and are written to the transaction logs but have not yet been committed to the database. Now clearly, in an unexpected shutdown situation such as a power loss, there's no time for the Exchange services to flush that data from memory and commit it to the database. So does that mean that the data is at risk of being lost? Well, let's have a look at what this Exchange server does when I cut the power to it. So in my Hyper-V console, I'll just do a reset, which has basically the same effect as power loss. You can see it's become unresponsive here in my RDP session. That will probably disconnect in a moment. So my server will take a few minutes to come back up online, and we'll take a look at it after that has happened. So my server is back online. We can see the unexpected shutdown event tracker has popped up. Let's see if my databases have managed to mount again. So they've all mounted successfully, and if we have a look in the event log, we can see similar logging recovery processes as occurred when we did the mailbox database restore. So you can see here that this DB2 database and also my DB1 database both starting up, and then a series of recovery steps, log files being replayed. The archive database begins the same process. So just to recap what's happened here, we had our Exchange server running, we had changes or transactions that had occurred in memory, had been written to the transaction log files, but some of them had not yet been written to the mailbox database file itself. And the Exchange database engine used that checkpoint to keep track of which of those transactions had been written to the database and which had not. So when we have an unexpected restart of the server, it's able to look at that checkpoint and determine which of the transaction logs need to be replayed into the database to recover that information that was lost in memory when the server restarted. So now let's try and simulate a failure of the transaction log volume and see how the database engine reacts to that. So I'm going to use the disk management here in the computer management console, and what I'm going to do is offline my log drive. So let's have a look. Once again, the current status of those databases is that they are mounted. And now let's offline the disk. The databases are still mounted for now. So now my databases have become dismounted. Let's have a look at the event log. We can see that here's a series of events for database DB1 saying an attempt to write to the file fdrive db1 e00 log failed. The device is not ready, so the disk is no longer accessible or able to be written to. Get a few more events there. The log file sequence has been halted due to a fatal error. Fatal database exception occurs. See the worker process for the database is stopped. database appears to have serious I/O errors. Now it does assess whether a failover is possible. If this was in a database availability group, a failover may actually be possible to another member of the DAG. But in this case, we only have one copy of the database because this server is not yet a member of a DAG. And so this database is unexpectedly dismounted. So the next thing I'm going to do is just stop my information store service, just to prevent Exchange from taking any automatic recovery actions. Go back to disk management and we'll online that disk. And just to make out that the disk was completely lost and we've had to replace it with a new disk, what I'll do is just go ahead and move those log files off to a temporary folder as though they've been completely lost. So now on the F drive there is no folders, no log files available. The disk is online. We'll start the information store service again. Databases are still mounted because they were dismounted at the time the service stopped, so it's not going to automatically try and mount them again. It's going to honour the last condition they were in. So let's see if we can get one of those databases to mount. So we get an I/O error attempting to enumerate log files in directory F db1. Let's just see what happens if we go ahead and create that folder and try mounting that database again. There's been an error. So let's consult the event logs and see if there's any clues. Here we go. Database was not shut down cleanly. Recovery must first be run to properly complete database operations for the previous shutdown. So our recovery tool, if you remember from an earlier lesson, is ESCUtil. Let's have a look at the state of the database file. We have a dirty shutdown. Switch to the log folder and just check the state of the log files with the ESCUtil/ml, and I have to provide the log file prefix, which I got wrong in that case. It's actually E00. Okay, no damaged log files were found. So let's try ESCUtil/r E00. Our logs are located in F db1 /d for our database location, which is EDB1. Operation completed successfully. Let's try that mount one more time. Still no good. So I'd say that leaves us with no choice in this case but to do a hard recovery of the database using ESEUtil with the /p command, the name of the database db1.edb. We get this warning here that we should only run this repair on damaged or corrupted databases. It will not apply information in the transaction log files, which we lost when the disk was lost as well, to the database, and may cause information to be lost. We don't really have any choice at this stage but to continue. Say OK. And this time we were able to get the database to mount. So of course we can repeat that process of attempting to recover each of the other databases on the server, seeing if the database will mount, if not, attempting a soft recovery, and then finally, if necessary, doing a hard recovery to bring the database back online. And obviously that hard recovery does carry with it some risk of data loss. Potentially there was information that had not been committed to the database, and the transaction log records for that information were lost when the transaction log drive failed. And this is the sort of scenario that database availability groups can help to mitigate. If we did have a failure on one server of its transaction log drive or its database drive, or any other failure scenario where data loss may occur, database availability groups, with their high availability and resilience features, can mitigate those risks and prevent data loss from occurring, as well as keeping the service online for our end users. And high availability is something that we're going to explore in the next module in this training course. So that wraps up our look at backup and recovery for Exchange Server 2013. I hope that you're starting to see the value now of creating your own training lab environment where you can perform this kind of testing and get some experience with backup and recovery scenarios instead of having to learn them on the fly in real-world high-pressure situations in production environments.